Out in the rain today and coming and attending this presentation. Before I announce our guest speaker for tonight, I would like to establish a decorum for this evening. I'd just like to ask for us to respect Dr. Roy in his position as the superintendent of LISD, and also to be respectful with your questions and comments. The topic that he's going to talk about tonight is going to be over the future financial landscape of the LISD schools. Immediately following his presentation, he will have a brief Q&A session where he will address any comments, concerns, or questions that you may have. Okay. With all that said, I'd like to introduce Dr. Roy, the LISD superintendent.
Thank you. You know, I always tell people that applause in advance of remarks is highly optimistic. Particularly when you all look comfortable. You mind if I kind of... This topic is not a lot of fun. I want to set out my purpose before I start working through the slides. The first thing is that we're going to be talking about solutions or possible remedies to the financial situations that school districts in. Those remedies could include a tax increase, but it's a tax increase that would be approved by the voters or not approved by the voters. I'm not here tonight to sell you on a tax increase. I'm here to give you information. My goal is that we get around to that point, if the board determines that we need to go out and do that, that at least when you go to the polls, you've got some idea about exactly what the issues are. So what I've committed to do was to speak to everybody who would ask me, and we've got, when I run out of slots on my schedule, we have board members doing this, we're going to have other administrators doing it. During the course of this year, it's our plan to talk to just about everybody we can. So I established a theme for this. I like to say that this catchy little theme belongs to me, but it doesn't. It actually came from a superintendent advisor that I had at Lamar University down in Beaumont, and he used to tell us all the time, the superintendents, guys, he said, remember, they're their kids, it's their money, and it's their schools to do that. And we try to keep that in mind as we work through this. You know, we've got good things going on in the district. I wanted to start off showing you exactly what's happening. We're back again being a recognized district. We have 32 exemplary campuses and 20 recognized campuses. You know, Flower Mound High School is the largest high school in the state to receive an exemplary rating. Our finance office is second to none. They just do tremendous work, and you'll see as I work through these slides some of the benefits that we've had from the good work that they've done. I think our finance department has probably won more awards, not just than any other district in Texas, but probably more so than any other district in the nation. They're really top notch. And I think that's important to note here that we're the only large district earning S&P's AA plus bond rating for 2 consecutive years. And given the financial times we're in, that's quite an achievement. Okay, I talked about student achievement. How many of you have seen the news and seen that SAT and ACT scores across the nation actually declined? Okay. Not in Lewisville. Okay. Our scores have gone up on the SATs and they've gone up on the ACTs as well. Incidentally, this was Karen Permetti in the back. Make sure this is going to be on our website if you want to get a copy of the slides that will be available for you. I see we're doing a video. That's going to be god awful to watch, but we'll do it anyway. And I also want to point out that we're not the only ones in this situation. As you look at what's happened to public schools across the state, the election that we would have is something that's called a rollback election, actually. But there's another official term I'll give you when we get to that. But there were hundreds of districts that have already done this. They've been forced into this position by the funding levels that have been established by the state. Now, for those of you who are not aware, that we have 2 tax rates in the district. This bucket on the left, that cute Karen put that together, that's pretty neat. All right. You know, you can see that salaries, utilities, supplies, insurance, and equipment. That's how we pay our bills. We pay teacher salaries, we run the buses, pay the light bills, all of those things. On the right, this is our interest in sinking fund, and that's capital improvements. We buy land, schools, if we buy any buses. For us, that's not as applicable because we use Durham Transportation. We've outsourced transportation. This particular side of the budget is voted on by you. When we go out for a bond election and you pass that, what basically you're telling the district has approval to set a tax rate that's necessary to pay the principal and interest on the district's debt. It's kind of like your mortgage on your house. That's exactly how this works for us. We have to pay our debt. And we have some things that we can do to kind of help us control the tax rate, and we do that. So when we go out for bond election, we generally tell the voters how high we think the taxes will go, and then we'll do everything we can to honor that commitment to hold taxes at that level. In 2007, the state passed House Bill 1. The idea was to replace Robin Hood. Now, you'll remember that when they did that, they threw all these new god-awful taxes into the mix. You remember that? Okay? They rolled everybody's taxes back to $1. Okay? But what they did when they did that is they kind of locked us in, and they took away our ability to manage inflation, to provide salary increases, to expand programs. And then we get to 2009, we get minimal correction to that. I want to go back to 2007. Since 2007, the values in LISD have increased by $3 billion. Okay. Now, the way we get our values is just like when you get your tax statement for your property. You take all the tax statements in the district, the ones for the businesses and the ones for homes and that, vacant land, everything. You add that up, we're about $22 billion, and it's grown by $3 billion. And people normally would say is, why do you have financial problems? Your values have grown by $3 billion. Okay. Of that $3 billion, does anyone want to hazard a guess how much of that money stayed in LISD? Any takers?
1.
0. Okay? So when we were in Austin this last time talking to the legislators about this, they've been, I'm going to give them some credit in a minute. I'm going to start off with the downside, but I'll get better. They bragged a lot about having a $9 billion fund balance, the rainy day fund. Okay, well, we thought it was raining pretty hard, but they didn't get into that. But what they did is they built that fund balance basically on the backs of school districts, because instead of doing away with Robin Hood, I think we have the largest Robin Hood plan that ever existed. The state now takes all of that money. They lock us into a certain target revenue, and it doesn't make any difference if our values go up, our revenue doesn't increase. The only way we increase revenue is if we pick up additional kids. Well, that would sound good because we grow. We grew about 800 kids this year. Unfortunately, we spend about $237 more per kid than we get. So it's really a unique thing. In schools, we've always said if you always take growth. Growth is the best thing you can have. People understand you need to build buildings. You got to do lots of things. They can see the kids coming. That's not so true anymore. Okay, show you how the budget breaks out. Over here, you see 83.64% of our budget is salary and benefits. That's because we are labor intensive. Okay, you've got a whole lot of folks that have to support a whole lot of people who are in classrooms. One thing people ask us about is, well, what about those runaway administrative costs? The state establishes an administrative cost ratio for districts the size of Lewisville. We're allowed to have an administrative cost ratio that's 11.05%. That's in relationship to what we spend on instruction. In Lewisville, we're less than 6%. We give a monthly report to the board on that. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to go out and add a bunch of administrative costs, but it does tell you that in terms of what the state says, we're in pretty good shape. That's how we operate. What the effects of inflation are for us, in 2005-06, we had 269,5,802 employees. Now we've got 339.7 million, 6,435 employees. During that course of that time, the majority of that money that's gone in there has been from salary increases that have been mandated by the state. Okay? And we're not certainly in opposition to that. I want to get back to the good point about what the legislature did. Okay? We told them that they ought to give us our money back because that's how they built their fund balance. But this year, what happened when all this stimulus money flowed, the legislature figured out a way to pass $120 of additional revenue per WADA. WADA is something called weighted average daily attendance. That's not just attendance, because different kids are in different learning situations, and it costs more to educate some kids than it does others. For instance, a kid who's in speech therapy has a weight of 5.0. Okay. Now, a speech therapist has to serve a lot of kids to get a full weight on that, so you kind of get the idea. You take all those weights, you multiply them out, so we got $120 per WADA. But they also told us that $60 of that had to go towards a salary increase for nurses, counselors, librarians, speech pathologists, and diagnosticians. We call them the happy five, the people who were included in that. Obviously, we weren't going to leave our other folks out of that, so we did some increase for our other folks out of the money on the other side of that. So we didn't get a whole lot out of that $120 in additional And that's the amount of money that we'll have for 2 years. Now, here's where the state did well. Because they used that stimulus money to flow that through to school districts, they didn't spend their money. And the reason they didn't spend it is because nobody knows what the situation is going to be in 2011. And by hanging on to that rainy day fund, they at least have a cushion if things aren't better. Because that money that they flowed to school districts will have to flow again. They're not going to go out there and take those salary increases from teachers back. So they're going to have to figure out some way to pay for that. Right now they're paying for it with stimulus. Out here somewhere they're going to have either state revenue is going to have to increase or they'll have to